How you doing, everybody? Chris Ramirez with Jay Simmons here. We are at Catch, Table, and Tap, Broadway and 30 in Merrillville. This is the next edition of Region Sports Table Talk, and thank you for joining us. Jay, what's happening, buddy?
Not too much, man. Enjoying a nice spring day here.
Finally got some spring weather back after a couple of weeks of the cold stuff. You're going to go out and play some softball later, is that right? Yes,
I am.
That's an old man's league, I hear. Huh?
Well, that's because I'm old.
All right, everybody, thanks for joining us. We're happy to be here at Catch, Table, and Tap. Going to do this for at least a few more weeks, talk some football in the off season. Not really looking ahead to the new year or talking about the past, just more kind of talking region football in general. And tonight we're going to do it with Brad Seiss, the head coach of the Merrillville Pirates. And Coach Seiss is here. He's going to join us in a little bit, Jay. But before that, you and I we go back a long way with Merrillville as fans. We're longtime region football fans since we were little kids. And, Merrillville is, when you think, for me, when I think of region football, some of these, the number 1, 2, and 3 programs would be Hobart, Merrillville, and Griffith that would come to mind. For my entire lifetime, basically, those programs have kind of been at the top. Maybe not Griffith so much recently, and Hobart even took a dive there for a little bit after the Don Howell era. But Merrillville's a program, Jay, since the town incorporated in 1971. They won state in 76, and the expectations every year have been to do the same. It's a great program, and we kind of want to talk about our origins, where we heard of it. How did we first get introduced to Merrillville football? Go ahead and tell what you told me on the way here.
Yeah, when we were driving here, and I'll never forget. I'm a classics, 70s guy. And Ray Rayner back in the day had the local state champions on his show, and my mom let me go to school late that day, and I watched, and there was a Merrillville High School football team with the state trophy in front of them on the Ray Rayner show. So 1976, in that fall of that year, it was a great experience just watching somebody from Northwest Indiana to be on WGN, because Chicago doesn't think of us as part of the Chicagoland area, but all of a sudden, wow, I get to see somebody from Northwest Indiana on WGN, whether it was in the morning or not. It was just awesome, and it was just one of those things as a kid you never forget. And I remember it to this day.
And for anybody younger watching, or maybe that didn't grow up in the area, Ray Rayner was a morning TV show set in Chicago on Channel 9, the local station, and all the kids watched it before school. It was on at, 7 in the morning. They had cartoons, all kinds of other stuff. And Ray Rayner played the sports highlights. You would get the Blackhawks highlights or the Bears highlights or the Cubs highlights. And it was hard to get those back in the day. You didn't see them everywhere. So little kids made sure to watch the Ray Rayner for those kind of things. And Jay, you're right. For Northwest Indiana to be included in something like that was a big deal, because that didn't happen. We didn't get recognized by the Chicago media for good things very often. So that's really cool. And we're the same age. That would have been when we were 11. For some reason, I don't remember that. And those are things in our house that were a big deal. We would have, we didn't miss those kind of things very often. My dad was aware of that stuff. So it's cool that you got to see that.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where you see it, and it's one of those things, even at 11, it still sticks out in your memory that, wow, Northwest Indiana made it big time. And it, like you said, we were the forgotten area for Chicagoland. I remember people, you live in Indiana, do you climb up a telephone pole to get to your phone?
Yeah, and you had 3 older brothers. You played football, your whole family did. So they were older. They were in high school at that time, at least a couple of them were. So you were familiar with the sport and aware of it. You knew you were going to play high school football. So to see something like that on TV from a school in your area that could potentially be on your schedule had to be pretty cool, even for an 11-year-old.
Yeah, it was
obviously
incredible.
You remember it to this day.
Yes, to this day. Yep. That was the first thing I mentioned when we got in the car and we were talking about Merrillville. I go, I got to say this one thing.
Well, here's my intro to Merrillville. Now, I do remember Merrillville slightly. There was a guy named Ken Dyke who played at Merrillville, graduated in 74, went to Notre Dame. We were big Notre Dame fans in my house, so we watched that. There were a couple other guys on that team. John Dubineski from Hobart. Randy Harrison was from Hammond High. So we watched a lot of that, but I didn't know much about Merrillville football other than that's where Ken Dyke went to high school. Then comes 1977. And you talk about the state championship team. They were the defending state champs, #1 in the state. My family had just moved from Gary to Munster, and Merrillville's on the schedule. Munster's number 4, Merrillville's number 1, coming to town. The whole week was just a big, big deal for the whole town. Then I remember getting out of middle school, which is next to the high school, on Friday, and there were people already everywhere. And a helicopter, like they said it was Channel 7, a helicopter was overhead, and we're like, wow, this is crazy. All this for a football game. And so my parents lived like 4 blocks north of the school, right on Columbia Avenue. So we're playing catch with my buddies, 5 o'clock or whatever it was before the game, before we go down there. And Columbia Avenue starts backing up towards the high school with traffic. I'm like, wow, what's going on? And we start talking to some of the people. It turns out they're Merrillville fans going to the game. It's an odd way to get to the game from Merrillville, by the way, but that's what they were doing. But, maybe they didn't have a telephone pole to climb up or something to make a call and get directions. I don't know. But anyway, we start talking to them. They say, hey, so where's the best place to get parking? It's going to be crowded and stuff when we get there. And I remember telling this one, I'm 12 years old. I tell this one, there's like 8 people stuffed in this car. I tell him, listen, you don't need to worry about parking. Just drive past the high school. There's a hospital right past the high school. You're going to want to park in there because that's where you'll pick up your boys after the game. And, of course, that didn't work out that way. Merrillville ended up winning the game 28-7. But there were 11,000 people there that night, Jay. And if you read the article from the Times, and I've looked it up since then at the library, the Times says 11,000 and change, maybe close to 12,000 people at the game that night at Munster. And I remember I was with our 7th grade group, sat up in the section of the bleachers, and you were just so crammed in you couldn't move. My dad was on the ground with my little brother in the end zone, and my dad claims to have been like 12 rows back in the end zone. And it's quite possible. There was people everywhere. Yeah. I have not been to a high school football game with more people in it. And this was a regular season game. This was not a tournament game. This was a regular season. I think it was, maybe week 5, I can't remember. They were non-conference opponents. Right. I do remember that. But Merrillville, again, defending state champs, number 1 coming in, Munster number 4 in the state, trying to knock them off. And that was my introduction. Not only that, I come from Glen Park, and everybody in Glen Park, they moved to Merrillville. Everybody, all my friends, and I had to hear from about how Merrillville was the state champs and all this stuff. And we ended up moving the other direction to Munster. And a year later, we all meet at this football game, And right. Guys are, we're 7th grade. Guys are acting like they're going to beat each other up and stuff before the game. And the adults come and break us up, and we go to our separate sections. But that was really my first, real-life introduction to Merrillville football. And those guys were bigger than life, I remember them running onto the field. They were like gigantic, And you realize even, as a 12-year-old, once the game started, and I'm watching from way up in the stands, we're in trouble. This is not going to go well. And it did. It was 28-7 was the final, and we were really never in the ball game. But, again, that was my introduction to Merrillville football. And ever since then, there's been an unwavering respect and like for the program. They represent Northwest Indiana. Yes, not only in football. They've done it in basketball as well, but I'm a football guy. For me, that's what I think of. And to have Merrillville all of those years, growing up, there were, and I know in the 80s, they had some years where they weren't necessarily spectacular. Well, but again, the expectations remain the same.
Yeah, well, that's where I had the physical beat down with Merrillville in the playoffs, 82 season, where Highland won its first playoff game. We won 14-13 against Merrillville, and I remember waking up the next day physically beaten. And it was one of the most physical games I've ever played in my entire life. And it was, of course, you remember your first sectional win for school and for your team, a 10-0 season, going 11-0. So it was, I remember that, that's the first time we encountered Merrillville because they were in a different conference at that time. But it was a lot of fun.
Well, I'll bet. And that would have been the fall of 82, your class of 83, so your season was 82.
Right.
We're the same age. Those are all the guys that I had grew up with in Glen Park that had moved to Merrillville and that I had originally planned to play high school football with. And as I said, we went to Munster. But so those guys, that was a heck of a group that you guys beat right there.
Yeah, it was.
But that was Merrillville football. They were, when you had Merrillville on your schedule or when you saw Merrillville, it was just There was something special about that program. And then for me, as I got a little older and started driving and got out of high school, I got turned on to the Merrillville-Hobart football rivalry when they were conference opponents. And growing up, Munster Highland, big deal back in the day. Big deal. Stadium sold out, town shut down back in the day. May not be like that anymore, but it was in the day. Now, you want to amplify that when you talk Hobart and Merrillville. Okay? I thought Munster Highland was a big deal, the Battle of the Bridge back in the day.
That's right.
To me, once I got hooked on the Hobart-Merrillville rivalry from the Duneland Conference years, the 80s and the 90s, it's unmatched in region football. There's never been a regular season rivalry for that long a period of time. Griffith and Andrean can match it for a short window,
yes.
Okay, in the 2000s. But for a 15 or 20, 25-year stretch, the Hobart-Merrillville rivalry was
great coaches. You can talk about Don Howe on the Hobart side, having all those great runs, and Merrillville in the middle having some great runs. And it was just that whole conference sort of took off from right there with that rivalry, and that whole Duneland Conference took off from there.
When you look at Demery Stadium, compared to the field that used to be there, I don't know if you remember that or not. Chain link fence, a small stadium, old school style, and now you've got the giant Demery college-style stadium there.
State of the art.
And that was put in for one reason. To intimidate Hobart. You couldn't match Bricky Bowl. You couldn't build a facility that would give you a home field advantage like Bricky Bowl could, a natural one. And Bricky Bowl was the best home field advantage in the history of Northwest Indiana football by far.
Yes, it was.
Then came Demery Stadium. What can we do here at Merrillville, to be on a par with Hobart when it comes to football? Build a college stadium right here along the highway. And now everybody that drives down I-65 looks out their window and goes, wow, look at that stadium.
Yeah, that is. It's an impressive facility.
Everybody.
Impressive.
Absolutely. And that's Merrillville High School. And that field is there for a reason, because football is so important to the community and the school.
Well, I think it's the lifeblood of Northwest Indiana. If you go from the Lake Suburban to the Duneland Conference, you're talking about some great conferences, and times have changed, and people have shifted around. But I think that's where it started, and that's where the history of Northwest Indiana football really lays back on us to the Duneland Conference.
Well, yeah, that, and you put that in, the Duneland started in 1970 and added some teams in the early first half, and then you get the state tournament coming in 1973, which changed everything, of course. And that's at the same time that the Duneland is forming as we know it, or for the most part as we know it now. And of course then 75, 76, and 77, the Duneland Conference wins state. I was 10, 11, 12 years old. I remember all this. I delivered the newspaper. You would read this stuff in the paper every day about how good the Calumet Region football teams were, and the Duneland Conference kind of laid the groundwork. And I think what's amazing about that is we have 3 state champions that early in the era of the state tournament, and not one of them says Hobart on the trophy. You got to wait for that. That doesn't come until a decade later, And when people naturally think of the Duneland and state champions, Hobart's the first word that comes to mind. The Duneland Conference was fantastic way before Hobart started winning titles.
Yeah, and it's just gotten better and better over time. And as they add teams and the conference gets better and the stadiums get better, it's just rose to the levels of the state, the conferences down in Indianapolis.
I think it's as good as any football conference in the state. So let's take a break on that. When we come back, we'll get Brad Seiss's opinion on some of this stuff.
Yes.
How's that sound? He's
that
here in the house with us, and we're going to join him. We're live. It's Region Sports Table Talk. We're live at Catch Table and Tap, Route 30 and Broadway in Merrillville. We'll be back after this on the Region Sports Network, the only game in town.
Did you know?
Wow, they'll prepare fresh fish while you wait.
Did you know?
They make over 40,000 donuts from scratch every week?
Did you know?
They offer 23 different deli platters for your party?
Did you know?
They have freshly chopped fajita mix ready to cook.
Did you know?
They have the best fried chicken in the area?
Did you know?
They offer our signature curbside service 14 hours a day.
Strack and Van Til, now you know.
Thinking about what to do after high school? Consider a career with Boilermakers Local 374. As a Boilermaker apprentice, you'll earn while you learn. We offer excellent wages and benefits, and as part of our no-cost hands-on apprenticeship program, you'll learn from the best in state-of-the-art training centers and on the job. Become a union Boilermaker and get on your way to a great career. Find out more, visit www.local374.org or call 219-845-1000.
Welcome back in, everybody. Catch, Table, and Tap is the location tonight. Region Sports Table Talk, the next edition coming out here with Jay Simmons. And we've got the coach of the Merrillville Pirates, the head coach, Brad Seiss, here joining us the rest of the way. Nathan Laird and Doug Ashenbaugh will jump in a little bit later on. But, hey, if you've been following Region Sports Table Talk, you know it's the off season, so we're not here to get up to speed on what's going to happen in week one of the new year or recap what happened last year. We're just here to talk some football and have some fun doing it. We're going to do that now with Coach Brad Seiss. Coach, I want to start off. You heard Jay and I kind of telling some old-time stories about how, as young kids, we sort of got introduced to Merrillville football. And you come from Warsaw High School, down Route 30 towards Fort Wayne, to anybody that doesn't know. What growing up was Merrillville, for us, Merrillville football was a big deal. What was your introduction? At what point in your life did you get introduced to Merrillville football?
Well, for me, growing up in Warsaw, you kind of had the option, like you saw the South Bend news or the Fort Wayne news. It was kind of like if you watch TV and all that type of stuff. So for myself, Penn was kind of always the big school that everybody talked about. At Warsaw, we would always kind of go back and forth between a 5A sectional in either Fort Wayne or in the South Bend area. So Snyder's always been the big player in Fort Wayne, and Penn has always been the big player in the South Bend area. To be honest, my biggest introduction to Merrillville football or Merrillville High School was simply, my dad was a PE teacher at Warsaw. He was actually the cross country and track coach, so he wasn't necessarily a football guy. So I didn't grow up in a football family, per se. But at Warsaw, they were looking to upgrade facilities while my dad was in charge of the PE department chair. So he went to Merrillville several times to see what they did to their track, to their weight room, the indoor track, all the things that happened in the '92 renovation that really, Merrillville University kind of came to play, so to speak. So for me, what Merrillville football was driving down 65, up 65, going to Chicago and seeing that big stadium. It's like, whoa. And, as a high school, I graduated in '02. The internet and just the idea of following teams across the state wasn't quite as easy as it is now. So, for me at Warsaw, up until the time I was there, didn't have a whole lot of football tradition. Our first ever playoff win was my freshman year of high school. And everybody got invited. So obviously that shows how much Warsaw struggled. That was 2000 or 99 was that first win. And then my junior and senior year, we were really good. State champion Penn team beat us 10-7. My junior year, they beat Center Grove in the state championship that year. Then my senior year, Fort Wayne Snyder beat us. And at that time, Valpo was up that was the Samarge era, and Jason Wren, who used to coach for us at Merrillville. So for me, to be honest, my first recollection of Merrillville, we played against them in the 2000 semi-state in basketball when I was at Warsaw. We beat them at Lafayette Jeff, and that was Fedak, Argenta, Lonnie Randolph, James Borum, those guys. And I knew Lonnie was a quarterback and all that type of stuff. But to be honest, when Merrillville football really kind of grew to me, when I played at Ball State, I lived with Riley Larimore.
There you go. Yeah.
At that point in time, I'm at Ball State living with him, and Dexter, James Aldridge, his junior year, obviously you got Mike Neal, you got Brandon Jordan, and obviously that 05 team, was really good, and they had the big Crown Point sectional game where it was like a massive crowd and all that.
Last sellout of Tilbury that I recall.
So for me, it was at Ball State. You saw like what those Warren Central teams were doing. If you watched you kept up on that scene, but Riley kept me up to date. Like, hey, my brother's going to Ohio State. They got a running back going to Notre Dame. They got an O-lineman going to Illinois, and Anthony Curry, who coaches our corners now, was their best corner and receiver. They're really good. And obviously from then on, in that kind of part of Merrillville football, once the end of Coach Yelton, and then when Coach Wells took over, really, really good. It kind of took, Mike Crutz, our principal, and Janice Police, our AD. Obviously they got me schooled up on the 70s and how good the 91 and 92 teams were. But you look at Merrillville football, there's always been pretty consistent success, which is awesome.
And that's been for a long time. And as we talked about, it's been through a number of different coaches and everything, including your tenure here. So, and for those who don't know, a little bit of his high school background that he touched on at Warsaw, this dude was a stud. Almost 4,000 yards rushing. He was also a linebacker. Unfortunately, my eyes are going bad, so I can't read. But, Jay, why don't you roll off a couple of those stats?
Let's see. What I got in front of me is 3,900 yards rushing, 750 yards receiving, 68 total touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Did you sell popcorn in the stands while you were there, too?
Parking cars before the game?
Maybe in the second half, but not in the first half.
Quite a career.
That's quite impressive.
Yeah. I grew up in an area at Warsaw where Al Rhodes was our basketball coach, who was at Penn. They obviously had that really good team this year. Warsaw was kind of known as a basketball school, and I had an older brother that was 2 years older than me, and his senior year, my sophomore year, I think we went 9-2, and finally kind of broke through and were halfway decent. And then my junior and senior year, we were pretty good. And ironically, one of the years we won the sectional here, we played Warsaw the first time they ever won the sectional championship. We played them here at the regional and spotted them a pretty good lead. Thank God we came back and beat them. I'd have never heard the end of that. But obviously, we had a good time at Warsaw. But Merrillville football, when you look at the, how prominent it is in the region, it's big, and I'm blessed to be a part of it.
Visiting with Brad Seiss, it's Region Sports Table Talk, live from Catch Table and Tap here in Merrillville. Having a good time with this show. We hope you guys are enjoying it. Right now, just again, we're not here to talk about the upcoming season or the preseason, just here to get to know the coach a little bit and talk a little bit of football. We can't talk enough football, Gary, whether it's off season or the regular season doesn't last long enough, so we got to stretch it out here and get it started a little early. But again, visiting with Brad Seiss here. Brad, after high school, after Warsaw, you went to Ball State, had quite a career there. We got Ball State Nate, our coordinating producer here, and I know he's going to want to talk to you a little bit about that because I believe you guys were there at the same time, if I remember right. And Nathan, you got cut from the practice squad. Is that correct? Well, Nathan was the Rudy. Nathan was the Rudy, and Brad Seiss was the guy. It was the offensive lineman in the movie who was. No, just kidding. Nathan was quite a high school football player. The year Tyler Radke scored 36 touchdowns, Nathan Laird snapped him the ball every time. So that's his background. You guys will talk more about that coming up. But right now, kind of focusing again on talking about Merrillville and really not just so much the history, but more about the legacy of the program, and they've been good for so long. And what I want to kind of maybe see if you can shed some light on, Brad, is what's the secret at Merrillville to be able to keep the expectations at the same place every year, regardless of the ups and downs of things, and it never seems to falter or waver. Granted, you guys aren't always going to hit those, goals and plateaus, but at Merrillville, the expectations and the goals remain the same. How is that, and why is that?
Well, I think it's great that the kids, when they're an elementary kid or a middle school kid, odds are during that time they'll have seen a good Merrillville football team, that hopefully made a a good run in the regular season and then a good tournament run. I'd be lying if I, like as much as you want to say, hey, we've had good coaching staffs and things like that. We've got really good players. And when you have good players, it makes our job a lot easier. And that's a testament to I think our program always being solid, and a parent feeling good about, hey, like I want my kid to play football at Merrillville because I know it's going to be run the right way. I know that there's a good chance that they're going to have success. I know there's a good chance that my kid might have a good opportunity to go play college football and all that type of stuff. And when you look at over the past 40 years or 50 years, however you want to say it. I mean, when I talked to Mike Krutz, our principal, about those teams in the mid to late 70s. I mean, they had guys that went to Notre Dame, to Purdue. Max Gill is getting ready to get put in the Region 1 Hall of Fame this Sunday. He was the MAC Defensive Player of the Year at Northern Illinois. So obviously that era had a lot of really good players. When you look at those teams in the 90s, with Joseph Forsky and Jamel Williams and Zach Wells. I mean, some really good players, during that time. When you look at, the years that we were talking about with Dexter Larimore and James Aldridge, really, really good players. And then, we've had obviously a real nice crop of guys, over the last, 5 or 6 years here at Merrillville. I mean, we've, had some Big Ten players, a lot of MAC players, and that helps. That helps you stop people on defense and score points on offense. So, it takes a lot of people to do that. I mean, we've got people that work really hard in the weight room. When you look at one constant, we've had a pretty consistent administration with our, with Mike Krutz being our principal, with our athletic directors, Janice Galiza and Amy Beckham. Like we've had kind of the same, group of people with the same, core values that know how important football is. I mean, every year, Mike Krutz talks to our student body and talks to our football team about, hey, like, you guys set the standard for how the school year is going to be. It's the first sport that people get to go see, and you create, excitement for the school and all that type of stuff. So it's important for us to be good in football. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, and there's no question that football kind of sets the tone and the reputation for a lot of schools. Let's face it. It is the first thing that, it gets a lot of media coverage. It's, a lot of people talk about it. And I think Merrillville's been a school that, you talk about having good players. Programs, that are good for that long must be developing players. So I think that, to me, is one of the things that Merrillville, you talk about the administration and the stability. We talked earlier about, the coaches. Granted, they haven't been there 30 years, but you look at the quality of these coaches that come in for a decade of time, it's pretty impressive. There's a list of Hall of Fame level guys that have coached at Merrillville.
Yeah, and to be honest, I probably took that for granted. I know when I got hired, I was just a young punk in my low 30s, and Zach Wells' last year in 14, I think went 6-6, won the sectional. It's probably his worst year, and I'm thinking, I'm taking over a team that went 6-6, and then you start digging deep, you're like, man, Zach won 3 regionals. Like, he did pretty good. You look at what Coach Yelton did, and obviously the Merrillville football got put on the map when they won the state championship in 1976. But from that point on, just a very, very high expectations. Good coaches that were leading the programs, great assistant coaches. I mean, that's the other thing that's huge. Like, Merrillville football, when we win a game, do they give maybe myself the credit for the win? But we've got 15, 16 assistant coaches that take ownership of their position, have a lot of pride in their position, and want their position to be the best in our program, and want to compete, on a daily basis. So it's not just about one group of players or a certain coach. I mean, it takes a collective, group to run it. And I think when you look at us, we've had a lot of consistency, having some coaches that have stayed for, assistant coaches that have stayed for quite a long time, and had some really good guys that have been there to lead the way.
Yeah, and you mentioned the leadership in the program, and you talk about Mike Krutzy, at 76, he's on that team. How much does it help having that kind of lineage? I mean, Merrillville seems to have everybody on the same page when it comes to the football program and how to get what they want out of the program. So how much does that, help your program, having somebody like a Krutzy, kind of help clear the path and lead the way?
Oh, he's awesome. I mean, obviously he played, at Merrillville. He coached at Merrillville, all the way to the point where he was a defensive coordinator for Coach Yelton. And then, he took the administrative path and became the principal. But, it's he knows the importance of mixing, sports and academics. And obviously, football is a very, it's an important sport. It's obvious. The NFL is, being close to Chicago is really is such a popular thing. And then we're in the middle of Big Ten territory, and Notre Dame's really close, and all that type of stuff. So just the idea of football being really important in the region, that holds true. And then when you start the school year, and obviously at our school being a decent sized school, it's important, because you got. We've got 140, 150 kids in the football program. That's a good portion of our student body. To set the tone for the school year is really important. So obviously there's high expectations of the way our kids behave in the classroom and what they're doing in the weight room, and as a part of our program, there's high expectations for us coaches. The one thing that I'm pretty proud with our coaches is I think we work really well with other sports. We're right now in the middle of spring. We got the DAC track meet coming up. That's a huge portion of Merrillville kids, football kids that run track. So we try to promote our kids to do as much as they can to help out, sports in every single season and be a part of everything. And it's just it's fun to be around.
And one last question before we take a break. Tell us about how your style of offense and defense, that aggressiveness, that passing game, that defensive blitzing, man coverage, how does that draw those kids into the program? It seems like you get some great athletes, not only in your era, but it seems like Zach Wells and all of you guys always had a very high-powered, very aggressive offense.
Yeah, I think that's just kind of being in tune, with the times and what's going on offensively and defensively. You've got to do, offensively and defensively what you have, and obviously at Merrillville we've been blessed to have good skill kids. Typically we're going to have a pretty solid running back and good receivers to get the ball to. Probably doesn't get talked about enough. We've had a really good history of having good quarterbacks.
Yes.
From Joseph Forsky, to the Raspopoviches, to DJ Wilkins was the first quarterback that I had, and these last few years, I don't think Angel Nelson, on our teams in 20 and 21 ever got the credit he deserved. A lot of people wanted to always write him off because he wasn't very tall and all that type of stuff, but he put the ball where it needed to go. And get it to to your guys that have a lot of talent's hands, and a lot of people want to talk about our speed and skill and all that type of stuff, but over the years, Joe Atria and Denny Hamilton, they developed great offensive lines. We sent a lot of big kids to go play college football. And line play is huge, and then here recently, we've had a lot of really good. Defensive lines. We've got an ex-Pirate, Brian West, that is our defensive line coach, and he's been blessed to have a lot of really talented kids. But there's a lot of kids that have talent. They've got to buy into what you're trying to do and work hard and take coaching, and he's been able to do that as well. So just it takes everybody to be on the same page, and kids working hard, coaches working hard, and all that on top of it.
All right, we have Brad Seiss joining us here. We have to take a timeout as much as I'm enjoying this. We're told over there by the guys behind the camera to take a break. And when we do, actually, Jay and I are going to check out of here. And then Nathan and, well, Doug's not even here yet. Oh, there he is, right there. I can't see that far. So Doug and Nathan are here. They're going to join in, and they're going to talk a little bit more with Brad about his time at Merrillville and that. We've kind of covered a lot of the pre-Brad Seiss here about the Merrillville Pirates. They're going to take it from here after that. So, Coach, thank you for joining us. It's great to see you and hang out with you.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me out.
You're welcome. We'll be back after this on Region Sports Table Talk on the Region Sports Network, the only game in town.
Hi, I'm Crowell Company's Lantern Man. I'll cover your motorcycle. I'll be with you on the water. I'll be with you on the snow. I'll cover your insurance needs wherever you go. I'll be at Crowell Agency from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. As Crowell Company's Lantern Man, I'm your insurance superhero.
Crowell Companies, the insurance professionals in Highland, Merrillville, and Michigan City.
From schools to stadiums, hospitals, and bridges, everywhere you look, union carpenters are building Indiana. With jobs and skilled trades in high demand, there's never been a better time to start building your future. As an apprentice, you'll earn a debt-free college degree, earn while you learn, and receive great benefits like healthcare and retirement. So what are you waiting for? Visit carpenters.com to learn more. Visit carpenters.com and start building your future today.
Welcome back to Region Sports Table Talk here on the Region Sports Network. We're coming to you live from Catch Table and Tap on 30 and Broadway in Merrillville. Nathan Laird and Doug Ashenbaugh. We kicked Chris and Jay out.
Yeah, kicked them out.
We're going to talk, that's right. We're going to talk about some modern-day Merrillville football here with Coach Brad Seiss. Coach, thanks again for joining us. And one of the things you guys were kind of talking about that last segment, your collegiate experience and everything. Obviously, a Division I recruit going to Ball State. I had to mention that again, of course. Being a Ball State grad myself. But that experience, you getting recruited compared to some of your guys getting recruited, because you've had some pretty big-name programs coming and talking to your guys. What's kind of the difference between being recruited in 2002 versus recruiting in 2023?
Well, in 2002, like, the only kids that had cell phones were like the rich kids, so that was not me. I remember coaches coming to like basketball practice, track meets, things like that, like in the winter and in the spring cycle. They come to school and see you and stuff like that. Much more regional. Obviously MAC schools would come and Big Ten schools and things like that. But again, the idea of now where the kids can reach you through your phone, your Twitter, your different platforms. Back then it wasn't like that. So I remember between my junior and senior year, I was very lucky. There was a coach at Northwestern at the time. His name was Brad Bollinger. He was an assistant coach. He was a Warsaw guy. His dad was the head coach at Warsaw way back in the day before I was born. So he was at Northwestern. Northwestern was recruiting me. So I remember going to like Northern Illinois and Toledo and Ball State and went to Northwestern. And probably the thing that helped me the most was Coach Bollinger was really like honest. He's like, hey, we are not going to offer you unless we don't get this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy. So I'm like, all right, I'm a MAC player. I've been offered by a few MAC schools. So that kind of made it real easy for me to just, I committed to Ball State. Bill Lynch was the head coach at the time. Ironically, he got let go a year later, and I played for Brady Hoke, and that was awesome. Mm-hmm. And Bill's son, Joey, was one of my roommates all 5 years in college. He's now the offensive coordinator at Vanderbilt.
And starting quarterback of some of those teams. At
Ball State. My experience was fine. Nowadays, you look at us in the time that I've been here. In 2020, JoJo Johnson got offered by Washington State. I remember. I mean, that's about as far as it gets.
What was the last time a region player went Pac-12?
Yeah, Justin Marshall's going to Colorado State for us. And again, we've had some Big Ten kids and MAC kids and all that stuff. It's just now they can, you can FaceTime and through Twitter and every coach now, for the most part, is going to have their contact information, out there on social media. So anybody can get a hold of you if they're recruiting your guys and all that type of stuff. So it's just it's so much different now. In Indiana, we can do some football activities now a couple days a week in the month of May. So we have our college night at 4, and I kind of organize the whole thing each year. And we had ours at 4, and then Coach Marshall had his at Valpo at 6, and then Coach French did his at Michigan City at 8. So they started our place. We had 17 schools watching our kids, run around yesterday.
And all various levels of
everything from Iowa State to Anderson College, or Anderson University. So, kind of there for everybody. So now it's a lot different, with how the recruiting, kind of goes. And from the time that we've kind of been really good and had a lot of good players, that's even changed because now the transfer portal's changed college recruiting, and we've had less people. We've had less college coaches in the building recruiting because amongst their 10 assistant coaches, they now have to go recruit not only high school kids, but if they had a junior offensive lineman leave their university, they got to try to find a junior, or something comparable to come in, because to expect a 17 or 18-year-old to come and be able to do what a 20-year-old can do is asking a lot. So the whole landscape of that's changed quite a bit too.
Talk about how everything is online now, and guys can just play their film and share their film so much easier than before. What kind of role do you play in that as well, like helping them get that film and the best usage for sharing it? Is that something you help those guys out with, or is that something you're kind of
the way we do it, when we play each week, obviously we watch the game film and we make sure the kids remember highlights and things like that. So we make sure we tell our kids to star their highlights and all that, and we help them make their highlight tapes and things like that. One blessing that we have at Merrillville, because in the last 5 or 6 years we've had some players each year, that keeps people coming in the door. It probably makes it harder on other schools. If like when I was at Warsaw, I was like our first Division I player in like 25 years or something like that. So the idea of like, hey, do I want to waste my time going to Warsaw to check this guy out? For a college coach, might be something that they think about. Luckily for us, because we've had some pretty consistent players over the years. Guys are going to stop by whether we have them or not, just to say, hey, you got anything this year, or what's coming down the pipeline, all that type of stuff, which obviously is very beneficial, for us. But it's our job as coaches. If I think there's a good, obviously I'm going to know the guys we play in the DAC and who's in our sectional and stuff like that. If I think a kid at such and such school is really good, like it's also my job. Like, hey, you stop by this school and check.
Right, you're
he's a good player,
you're there for the kids, even if they're not in your league.
So I know that the other guys in the league are doing that, trying to, Chris Skinner always, when the recruiting cycle kind of starts, like, hey, who do I need to tell you guys about? And I'll ask them the same thing, like, hey, who are your good guys coming up and all that type of stuff. So it's our job to help other guys as much as possible too.
Yeah, I think it segues into, obviously, as cool as it is to get recruited D1 as a player, now you're on the coach's side. How does that make you feel now? Is that, a totally different kind of feeling? What is it like being on the coaching side now rather than a player?
It's really cool. Like, we had a kid get offered today. He's a current sophomore, going to be junior linebacker, and it was his first one. So it's kind of cool to be able to call or text the mom and be like, hey,
Right.
You know, it's real. You know, she's like, "Are you serious?" And so that part's cool. Obviously, you know, like Coach Brian West, one of our D-line coaches, he told me today, he's like, "Hey, man, like next year, Minnesota and Michigan play. Like, we need to go somewhere and have all the team watch the game, you know, together on a Saturday. You know, it's not often like that. You have that be able to happen. You know, and you know, I think I have maybe a different perspective of things. While I was playing at Ball State, my older brother was playing at St. Francis in Fort Wayne. You know, and like this year we had 3 kids sign with Indiana Wesleyan, and another kid was St. Francis. You know, so everybody wants to talk about the guys that go to the Big Ten, the MAC, the Division I guys, and all that type of stuff. But you know, my brother's education probably, you know, his scholarship was probably a more, you know, expensive one than mine. You know, he was going to a private school compared to me going to Ball State.
It's the Harvard of Muncie, to be fair, though.
It is. It is. Right. But you know, it's cool to know that you know you can kind of catch up and see how your guys are doing. You know, no matter what the level and all that. And you know, it's because we've had a lot of guys play over the years here. You know, when the coaches come in and recruit, it's like, hey, how's Chris doing? How's this guy doing? And you know, kind of make sure, you know, that the story that the kid's saying how school's going is matching up with what his coach is saying, and all that type of stuff. So it's kind of cool to be able to probably know a little bit more about different college programs because you need to, because you got kids in their programs and stuff like that.
What's it like, especially, you know, again, going back to some of those bigger schools, to have a Jim Harbaugh, to have a PJ Fleck coming to your school? That's, I mean, that's got to be intimidating. Is that the right word? Just kind of like, oh crap, you know? It's,
you know what? Intimidating, but like they're normal guys too. Like
is Jim Harbaugh a normal guy?
Jim Harbaugh might be one of the funniest guys, you know, out there. You know, he comes in and you know, he literally sat in our athletic office, and you know, anybody came in and wanted a picture, the nicest guy in the world did that. You know, kind of, you know, told stories about, you know, the past, what was going on, you know, all that type of stuff. Actually, he had a blister on his foot, and he took his shoe and sock off and had and asked for a Band-Aid from Amy Beckham, one of our athletic directors. You know, so like I said, you know, so, yeah, he's a very, you know, and when you talk to when we talk to Kenneth now, you know, he loves it at Michigan. Mm-hmm. He loves Coach Harbaugh. He's a normal guy, and even, you know, as a football coach, it was really cool when somebody asked him, "Hey, why did you go to Michigan?" He said, "It felt the most like Merrillville." You know, so as a coach, like, hey, maybe we're doing something right.
Right,
you know,
that's a big feather in your cap there.
You know, so you know, it's kind of cool when you know, your kids, you know, value, you know, what we're trying to do for them and the hard work that everybody's putting in.
Yeah. So out of all the coaches, obviously you've had a ton come through your office, come through that school. Would you say you have a one that's kind of the most memorable, that you enjoyed the most?
Outside of asking Amy Beckham.
Yeah, I don't know if the Band-Aid story gets topped at this point.
I don't know if you can top Coach Harbaugh. You know, Coach Fleck had, you know, unbelievable energy, you know, and all that type of stuff. You know, and we've had a couple kids sign with Ball State. So obviously, for me as the guy that played there, you know, it's kind of cool to have their coaches come in. But you know, like when, you know, even like when Justin, you know, Marshall was getting recruited, you know, when Paul Chris from Wisconsin just comes in the spring and shows how, like, you know, high value of a recruit he is, right? And you know, and all that type of stuff, you know, is really cool. And you know, like, you know, a lot of those guys that coach, you know, might have played high level football, or, you know, you can talk about guys that coach and things like that. So you know, there's plenty of good stories, you know, about all those guys, you know, but you know, when it comes down to it, you know, most of them are good guys that care about the kids. You know, obviously they just are at a much higher level than, you know, than us high school guys and all that type of stuff. But you all trying to accomplish the same things. Trying to create good men and help them be the best version of themselves, and that's what we're trying to do in Merrillville.
Yeah.
And trying whether that's helping a kid go play college football or helping a kid just graduate or whatever. That's our job, is to try to help a kid whatever he's looking for out of football.
Yeah, and I think a big thing. Sorry,
No, go ahead.
but I think one thing that I pick up even just having this conversation is it's not about the big schools either. It's how many kids you guys are also producing. D3, like you said, D2, all these other schools too as well that they're signing at. You guys do a remarkable job, and I don't know if there's another program in the region that's doing as much as you guys are in the recruit that you guys are getting out there. But it's pretty remarkable to watch, Coach.
Yeah. I think there's kind of two things you can think about that. Like, yeah, they're talented enough to go, play college football. But the other thing too is they want to keep playing.
Yeah.
I don't know if we created a miserable experience for a kid, through high school, then they're going to be burnt out and not want to play college. So, when we have a lot of kids that are not only talented enough to play college football, but also want to.
Yeah.
I think that hopefully it gives all of us that are coaching the kids make us feel good that hey, we're trying to teach these kids life lessons and trying to better them and by them wanting to continue to go play, that's a good thing as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Coach, we got one more segment with you coming up after this timeout. It's our lightning round. We got some quick questions for you. All right. A couple curveballs we're going to throw at you, but we're going to take a timeout first. And then we got one more segment coming up here at Catch Table and Tap in Merrillville. Region Sports Table Talk continues after this here on the Region Sports Network, the only game in town.
Develop skills that will last for a lifetime with an apprenticeship with the Bricklayers and Allied Craft Workers Local 4, Indiana, Kentucky. The apprenticeship and training program is committed to developing highly skilled bricklayers, terrazzo workers, and ceramic tile setters to provide the construction industry with the best hands in the business. If you are currently working non-union and want better pay with benefits, or if you think learning a new skill with a paid apprenticeship while you earn your associate's degree is the right path for you, visit baclocal4.org/training to learn more about the apprenticeship program. Are you built to succeed?
Back here from Catch Table and Tap one final time here on the Region Sports Table Talk. We got the lightning round with Coach Seiss. Fun round. Quick questions for you, Coach. Nothing overly serious. So
maybe one in there. I'm just letting you know.
One may throw you off a little bit and may get you in a little trouble. So, but not with more.
Okay.
So we're gonna keep it easy. Claude, you got the timer on? Claude Martinez, our producer, got the timer going. Here we go. Favorite football player of all time, any level, high school, college, pro.
As far as who I like?
Yes.
Deion Sanders.
Really?
Yeah.
Maybe you'll meet him one day too. Hey,
yeah.
Maybe he's coming out there.
Yeah, remember Colorado comes in.
Yeah. I remember getting his shoes. So Deion Sanders.
Okay, maybe this answers the next question. Your favorite football team growing up? Living in Warsaw, was the Lions the closest team?
We were split. We got the Colts and the Bears. My whole family was Colts. I was Bears.
I know.
Okay. That's weird. I'm a Bears fan with Deion Sanders. I would not have guessed that. If you were a teacher or a coach, what would you be doing?
Probably Warsaw's a big orthopedic town, so probably some sort of device sales or something like that. I have a lot of friends that kind of do that.
Which is what we had Craig Osik on last show,
Yeah.
and that's what he did.
That's what he
before
did.
Started. He did medical science before that, so a little bit of interesting there. Non-football hobby. I know football takes up most of your time.
Non-football hobby. I like to play golf. I'm not very good at it. My oldest son is 11. He's a very good golfer. It gives me an excuse to go out and play. Like I can explain that one to my wife because we have four kids.
There you go, father-son bonding time.
Yeah, if I take him and the 9-year-old, I'll usually play them, and they'll do a 2-man scramble against me and usually beat me and tell mom about it and all that fun stuff. But golf would be the hobby.
All right, so maybe this is the next one. Favorite sport that isn't football?
Favorite sport that isn't football? Golf. Yeah. Growing up, obviously, I didn't play it. My dad was the head track coach at my high school. So track. I was a 3-sport person, but besides football, it was running track, playing basketball, just kind of like doing everything.
All right, here's the last one. It may hurt somebody's feelings here. You have to pick a college football catchphrase out of these 3 options: row the boat, hail to the victors, or chirp chirp.
Man, got a little.
You have to pick one.
I have to pick one. Hail to the victors. Chirp chirp's kind of corny. I don't know. It's not really intimidating.
No, it's not. Are you saying the Nest isn't a great name for a student section?
It wasn't a real packed student section, so
to be fair,
not.
I was there when you were playing, and we tailgated and then went and watched Notre Dame after.
Oh, sorry.
Come on, man. You didn't like the Nest either. Is that a question to you?
Tickets were free to go to the game and go to watch some of the games.
So you wouldn't pick chirp chirp either, then, is what you're saying?
I would.
It was
had no connections to Michigan or Minnesota.
It was pretty bad. I remember my dad telling me my redshirt year that he'd typically go with my brother's current brother-in-law. He would go tailgate with him while the game was going on. He knew I wasn't going to get in, so he
tailgating was the fun part. I mean, there's not much else to do in Muncie besides tailgate. So hail to the victors he picked. So
that's what it is.
Well, again, we talked about Kenneth Grant real quick, and I saw a few weeks ago that Mason Gold game. He was the number 1 overall pick.
Yeah, which
is insane.
Yeah, he's doing a great job. Last year in August, while we're doing getting ready for season to start. Coach, I'm drawing a blank. Coach Elson, the D-line coach, kind of texted me out of the blue. I hadn't even, reached out to see how he was doing yet or anything like that. He said, "Hey, Coach Kenneth is, you'd be really proud of him. He's doing a great job." So I'm thinking, yeah, he must be doing all right. And obviously he played every game this year, and he was a little bit behind. A lot of those kids now graduate early.
Right. And get on campus a semester.
Yeah, and he didn't. So he's really, I guess, in the weight room just kind of – we took him for granted, because we were always around him. He's obviously a massive human being.
Yeah.
And I don't know, when you're around him so much, maybe you don't see him as big as he is. But, I took him to a lot of places recruiting, and every time you'd walk in somewhere with them, they'd be like, "Who's that guy?" And he looks so good now. Just some of the baby fat's gone away, and
a great kid too. My few interactions with him, just a great kid.
Yeah, he never thought he was bigger than he was, or more important than he was, or anything like that. He was just always had a nice smile, and was he's always been really humble and a hardworking kid, and for him to be the first pick in the Maize and Blue game, awesome. They expect him to start this year, and it's exciting for us to see what he does, each week and all that type of stuff. And obviously we talked a lot of Merrillville football history. Kelly Keogh was a Michigan guy, so I always kind of text him the update, on Kenneth and what's going on, all that type of stuff. But he's definitely making all of us proud.
Well, there you go. That's why Coach picked hail to the victors. They row the boat from Minnesota. Obviously, Martez Lewis there at Minnesota, doing a fantastic job there with Coach Fleck, and then obviously Chirp Chirp, Coach Seiss's alma mater. So we got hail to the victors. We can edit that out so nobody gets offended from that.
Yeah, just don't show it in Muncie.
All right, we won't show that. Coach, thanks again for joining us. We appreciate you spending some time here, Catch Table and Tap here on Region Sports Table Talk.
Thank you.
Our executive producer is Chris Ramirez. He was the co-host in segment 1 with Jay Simmons. Claude Martinez is our on-site producer and video editor. Doug Ashenbaugh, my co-host here. I want to thank Jason Evans and all the great folks here at Catch Table and Tap for their hospitality. Appreciate you, the viewers, spending some of your night with us here watching Region Sports Table Talk. Next episode, we got a special guest. We're extending the boundaries of the region next week and doing some historical stuff next week as Doug, who's joining us next week?
Oh, Rusty Bones, good old Russ Rackey.
Russ Rackey joining us next week here from Catch Table and Tap. As long as a calf's not being born is what I was told.
Yeah.
He'd be joining us. So
and that's a serious concern, too, by the way.
As long as everything's going good on the farm, Russ Rackey will be our guest next week. Thanks again for tuning in. This has been Region Sports Table Talk on the Region Sports Network, the only game in town.
Region Sports Network, the only game in town.